All right, so thanks so much for joining us. This webinar is on successful IEP meetings with Professor Taberski. And this is sort of the second webinar in what's going to end up being a three-part series on IEPs. I'm really excited about that. Professor Taberski did one 2 weeks ago on writing effective IEP goals. This one's on successful IEP meetings, and we're going to have another one in a couple of weeks with Dr. Larios on encouraging student participation in IEPs. So really cool, really valuable information that we're so happy to bring to you. These webinars are sponsored by the School's First Federal Credit Union and hosted by the Center for Creativity and Critical Thinking. And this particular series is being conducted by the Department of Special Education. So thank you so much for joining us and for investing this time in your professional development. We really applaud you for putting this time in and caring about your own effectiveness as a teacher, to put in this extra free time. We know that you don't have a lot of it. So hats off to you for being here. I'm going to hand it over to Professor Taberski, and then at the end, I'm going to pop back on and beg you to take a quick survey so that we can continue getting funding, so that we can continue offering you these webinars at no charge. And then another thing I'm going to be doing is I will post this PowerPoint, the link to this PowerPoint, in the chat. And I'm going to keep doing that sort of repeatedly so that the folks who join, they can't see the previous chat. So as I hear a few more people join, I'll just post it again. So you can ignore it after you've gotten it, and I'll just kind of keep posting it until it seems like everyone's here. All right, so you can take it away.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. I see some familiar names, and it's so nice to see students that I know. So thanks for joining. Feel free to pull the PowerPoint for this presentation from that link that Dr. Rao just posted, and it's a PDF, so you can scroll back and forth within the PowerPoint in case if you're thinking of a question and you just want to know if it's coming up. You are free to post a question on the chat, or to also just unmute yourself and join in the discussion. I'm open to either one of those. So this is some of the topics that we're going to cover. And if you've taken a class with me, you know I love talking about special ed law. So of course I'm going to start with that. And I think it just kind of gives us that framework of what do we need to be keeping our eyes on when we discuss our role as the professional in running these successful IEP meetings. So in IDEA, it tells us, right, that the public agency has this responsibility. And you're going to see these terms used both in the law and in various special education publications of LEA, SELPA, or school district, or public agency. So the LEA is our local educational agency. It's another word for SELPA, which is our special education local plan area. And within most SELPAs, there's one school district or a few school districts. So you might see those terms used interchangeably. Just know that for most of you that go on to a school district position, this is where it's kind of coming from, of what our responsibility is. And I would like to remind everybody, right, we are the professionals, we are the practitioners, and we are the ones who are responsible for all of this when it comes to IEP meetings. The onus is on us, it is not on the parents. We need to meet them where they are. This is not about the parents meeting us where we are. So that's just one of those kind of frameworks I want us to have in place when we talk about a successful IEP meeting. So we know that it is our responsibility to ensure that one or both of the parents are present at each meeting and that they're given the opportunity to participate. We have to notify the parents of the meeting early enough to ensure that they will have an opportunity to attend, and schedule the meeting at a mutually agreed upon time and place. Now, you'll notice in the law, it doesn't give an actual framework of you must notify the parents 30 days before the IEP or 2 weeks before the IEP. It just kind of gives this framework of a reasonable amount of time, right? And then also that it's a mutually agreed upon time. So it definitely goes to show that we as the school professional need to partner with the parents. This sometimes is a conversation. It's not us setting the date time. Although a lot of times parents look to us to set the date and time because they know that we have many students on our caseload. They know that we have many professionals that we're going to bring to the meeting. But just know that it's okay for a parent to say, I'm sorry, that date and time doesn't work. And for us to go back to the calendars and pick another date. And that's why it's really important to do this early, right? So that you have enough time if you need to reschedule. Now, keep in mind that that written notification form that has to go home, on that form, and this is in the law, on that form, we must include what the purpose is of the meeting. So if it's initial, annual, triennial, or transition meeting, and sometimes, right, it's both. It might be their annual and their transition. Also include the date, time, location of the meeting, and who's going to be there. If neither parent can attend the IEP meeting, the public agency must use other methods to ensure parent participation, and that can include individual or conference telephone calls. Now, IDEA was written before our coronavirus COVID-19 school shutdowns, but I think that they kind of foresaw there are times when parents can't make it to a meeting. And obviously doing teleconference and video calls now has become very much the norm for our IEP meetings. So also keep in mind that if it is the IEP happening when the child is going to turn 16, so that means if you're teaching some middle school students, but definitely if you're teaching high school, you have to make sure that the meeting meets the requirements for transition. So that includes you have to invite the student and any other agency, right, that would be invited, such as regional center, workability, any of those kind of job trainings or adult information that needs to be included when children get to that, I shouldn't say children, students get to the age of transition. So also you want to make sure that in the event that you have to conduct an IEP meeting without a parent's in attendance, it must be under very rare circumstances, right? And in the law, what it tells us is that it means that we were unable to convince the parents that they should attend. This is very, very rare. This is like 1 in a million. But in this case, the public agency must keep a record of its attempts to arrange this time and place. That includes recording how many telephone calls you made, the correspondence you might have sent, any record of maybe a visit to the parent's home or place of employment. So it's very much a lot of steps that are going to happen in that case. But by that point, probably you would have an administrator that would take over that case because the parents are not responding to you. Also make sure that you understand in the law, it tells us that an interpreter must be available at the meetings, and that includes deafness. So if you have a parent who needs an interpreter, it might be an ASL interpreter, or it might be because the parent's native language is other than English. And also that you have to give a copy of the child's IEP at no cost. So the next part of law that I always like to talk about is case law. So there is one case that happened in 2013 that relates to this idea, right, of having an IEP meeting without that parental participation. And guess what? The school district lost because they held the IEP meeting without the parents. And what the district said is, well, we offered them 3 dates and the parents declined all 3. But when the judge looked at the case, the parent was sick on that 3rd date. The parent had contacted the administrator. The parent had offered other dates to meet. And the school said that they held the meeting because otherwise the services would lapse, right? Like the IEP would hit the end date. But the court stated that parental participation, right? It's so key to the operation of IDEA, right? The parent has to be part of that IEP development process. And as we know, IEPs don't really expire. Those services just continue until you have a new IEP in place, even if that means it's an exit IEP. But in any case, what the courts told us through this decision is that it's more important to hold the meeting with parental participation than to hold it in time to meet an annual deadline. And that's really important, I think, for us to consider how legally and case law is telling us parental participation is our #1 objective when it comes to our IEP meetings. And just to reflect, right? Why is that? Like the law is telling us, but what do we also know as professionals? Well, we know that the family is the child's number one advocate, right? No one knows the child better. No one loves that child more. And no one is going to be more invested in that long-term development of the child, right, than the family. And if we feel as practitioners and as professionals in education that we want what's best for the child, right, entering our program, we want to build a positive relationship with the family. So that should really be our number one priority when it comes to having our IEP meetings. And always keep that in mind. I know it gets frustrating sometimes when you're trying to schedule meetings or you're trying to get paperwork back from a parent and get them to participate with you in this IEP process. But keep in mind that research and the law lets us know these kind of ultimates, right? The family, the parents have got to be involved in this process, and we really cannot have the IEP meeting without them. So how do we plan for this meeting the best? And really, right, your best IEP, it happened because you did planning so far in advance. So set yourself up for that success. If you can sit down at the beginning of the school year with your special ed team and plan out your meetings for the whole year, then you can be the one who sees that continuum of giving yourself enough time to complete any triennial assessments that need to be done, making sure that you don't push them all off to the end of the year. If you have a lot of students that have a June or May, June kind of due date, maybe bringing a couple up to March, April so that they're staggered enough that you have the time to put into writing appropriate goals and really getting the data for those present levels. You don't want yourself to be left with 6 meetings happening over a course of 2 weeks. You would probably lose your mind. That's a lot of work to get done in a short amount of time. And you're also not leaving yourself a buffer, because what if a parent gets sick and they cancel and they need to reschedule? You want to be able to have enough time in your calendar that it doesn't get super frustrating. Always make sure to give the parents that date and time with enough time for them to reschedule, because you might give it to them and they might say, well, let me see, because they might need to talk to the spouse or the other parent of the child. They might have other family members they want to bring to the meeting, or a private therapist they want to bring to the meeting. They might have to schedule childcare. They might have to take time off work. There's a lot of factors that go into a parent showing up to a meeting. So don't be put off if they say, hang on, I need to check. You can check in with them after a couple days and say, I just want to follow up. But just keep in mind, it's definitely a thing where you need to work with them and you need to meet them where they are. So if you do send home that IEP meeting notice, I just have a note here, send home any of your parent survey paperwork with that IEP meeting notice. It'll just cut down on the amount of things that you're sending home and asking the parent to complete or fill out. Now, 2 weeks before the meeting, send home a reminder notice, right? Put it in the child's backpack, send home an email, just a little reminder, right? The meeting's going to happen in 2 weeks. And the day before the meeting, do a phone call home. You will save yourself the trouble of having to reschedule, postpone the meeting, try and come up with another date if you give parents a phone call as a heads up, right? You know, when you have a dentist appointment, how they always call you the day before to say, we're going to see you at 3 o'clock tomorrow, right? Well, it's kind of like that. The reason the dentist does it is because they don't want this empty slot that they're holding and that they lost, right? And the same thing for us. We know that we have put all of this planning, gotten all of these professionals together, and we can't all just show up there and sit there and say, oh, the parent's not here, they must not care, right? Sometimes you need to be the one who's the professional that calls ahead of time, say, just a reminder, we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. You can also put the parent's mind at ease, right, to get that reminder phone call. So definitely just make that a habit going forward with your caseload. So once you have that date agreed to by the family, that's when you need to look at your calendar and plan out so that you have enough time to spend with the student, so that you get data collection for progress on their prior goals, that you're getting baseline data as you're writing new IEP goals. The parents must be interviewed for their concerns and priorities as you are writing your present levels and your new goals. So you could use, right, maybe you sent home a paper survey form with the IEP meeting notice, but you can also create a Google survey form. And if you create it really well, you actually could just use it for every student on your caseload. And it can really cut down on having to worry about the parent losing the paper or getting it back to you on time. Google survey forms are so easy to do on a tablet device or a handheld or phone. So it really is a really accessible way to reach out to your parents. And then make sure when you talk with the parent, and I have a note that you could also do a phone call and just do a phone interview with the parents if they prefer that method. Make sure that you ask about any outside services the child receives. It's really important that the IEP document captures that you had that question to the parents and the parents let you know. So whether you put that in the IEP notes or you might have a discussion about, is the child receiving any outside ABA or OT or speech? That's really important for the school team to know. Then also make sure you let all of your team members know, right? Your speech therapist, APE, the gen ed teacher, any of the other people that are going to be at the meeting. And then also gather other information you're going to need to update the IEP documents. So if the school nurse has done a new vision and hearing screening, sometimes they do those periodically throughout grade levels as required by the state. There's also behavioral information that you might get from your autism specialist. And then there's also test scores, right? If the student is an English learner and they took the LPAC or the alternative to the LPAC, the CA, the CASP, the physical fitness testing that they do for students, some of that information you're going to have to get ahead of time so that you can input it to the IEP document. Because when you're sitting in the IEP meeting and those kind of questions come up as you go through the paperwork, it can really hold up the meeting when you say, oh, wait, I got to go into Aries. I got to find their test results. Oh, wait, I got to, so get some of that information ahead of time, print it out, have it ready for the meeting. It'll really cut down on that kind of bumping, through the meeting. So this also, if you notice, it's kind of legal in format. So this is letting us know who needs to be at that IEP meeting. Well, as we know, you can do the meeting with one parent or both. The parents can also send a representative. You need to have at least one gen ed teacher. And if the child has more than one gen ed teacher, the school can choose which one attends. You also need to have at least one special education teacher, or it could be a speech therapist, right? Who's that service provider? If a student only receives speech therapy, it would be them. Also, you need to have a school district representative. So this is usually your counselor, principal, school psychologist, someone who's sitting, it might be a program specialist or an assistant principal. They're going to be the one who's able to commit resources of the district, right? Who's able to talk about other programs in the district or speak to what is, the information we need to know for any of those discussions of placement or inclusion or services. If there were assessments that were done, either the individual who conducted the assessment or someone who's knowledgeable about that, right? So that would only be in the case of an initial or a triennial or a solo assessment, like a speech only, or you have a student who's in an SDC classroom, but you're adding on an OT assessment. So maybe at that annual meeting, you're just going to have the OT present their report. Now, this next bullet point, right, says other people with specific expertise or knowledge of the student at the parents or district's request. So as we know, the parents can bring with them to the IEP meeting anybody that they want to. Now, just as a frame of reference, because this has come up before in classes that I was teaching where people would tell me that, maybe a family member of theirs had an IEP meeting and the district told them you can't bring anybody else. So I just want you guys to know it is in the law that the parents can bring someone else to the meeting, right? Like an aunt or a cousin or another family member, maybe it's a neighbor or a child care provider outside of there. The parents do have the right to bring somebody with them to the meeting, given that that person has knowledge about the child. Now, the student can also be present at the meeting. And also if the student is transition age, the school must invite the student to attend the meeting. If the student does not attend, then the district must take steps to ensure it obtains the student's input, right, as part of that transition process. So Sheila has a question. Is the district allowed to coordinate services with the ABA service provider? She says, I have a student who's ABA provider is in the home while he's online with school, but is not allowed to provide support during the lesson. However, this is a new stipulation. And is it the speech therapist sees that student teacher without the support from the ABA, the students, okay. So Sheila, are you asking if the outside ABA service provider can come to the IEP meeting?
No, I'm wondering if we can write, thank you for, I hope it's appropriate that I'm asking the question. I'm supervising student teachers all in special ed. And so that's why I wanted to be here today so I could give them, support them, because it's pretty overwhelming. I have and she's actually an intern student teacher who's working with kindergartners. Up until 2 weeks ago, the ABA providers in the house at the same time that he is online with the teacher. ABA support is still there during the time, but now ABA providers saying, oh no, he can't help. And so the student doesn't have that direct support, and it's very, very difficult for him to stay online. She's very worried.
Sorry, not to interrupt you. Do you know if the ABA service provider, is that an outside agency? So it's
Yes.
not an employee of the district?
Correct, it's an outside agency.
So who is it that told the student teacher that the ABA therapist couldn't be?
The ABA provider company.
Oh, well, then that's their choice. So
we have to leverage to coordinate services because it's detrimental to the student.
Yeah.
This person's getting paid to be there, but the student's online. So that's my question.
That would definitely be something that if the student teacher is an intern, right, they're operating in all auspices of being a teacher, they really should talk with the parent about, because if the ABA services are through insurance or another outside agency, the parent has support, then the parent is the coordinator for those services, and the parent can say, no, I want you to be there during the online school session. I mean, that's more of the parent's choice because the child's in the home.
It's a place to start. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a good question. There actually was a really big legal case about an ABA therapist trying to go into a school to provide services. It happened in Washington. The school district, the parent sued the school district because the school district wouldn't let the private ABA therapist come to the school site because of legality, and they didn't want to be liable for another individual on campus if they got injured. But actually the parent won the case, because it was a medical service, because it was through medical insurance, and we can't withhold medical services to students. Interesting, but good question. I love talking about any legal case. So what do we know about our IEP meeting timelines? Well, we know that we have to hold the annual IEP meeting, right, within 12 months from the date of the last IEP. You guys have all heard that. It's very kind of clear cut and straightforward. Now, the most common question that I get about IEP team meetings is, if a parent requests an IEP meeting, how fast do we have to have it, right? We've all heard this like emergency IEP meeting, and there is no such thing as an emergency IEP meeting, unfortunately, until there's discipline involved, right? If you're going to suspend a student for more than 10 days, then you get into manifestation determination. So I would say, in all terms, the only real emergency IEP meeting that will happen in a shorter than 30-day time period is if the student's going to be suspended for 10 days. But again, very rare. So if a parent says, I want an IEP meeting, right? I want to discuss whatever issue the parent has, the district has to hold that meeting 30 calendar days after that written request is received from the parent. Now, the timeline does stop for school breaks in excess of 5 school days. So that is winter break and summer break. If spring break is 1 week, it does not count, because that is not excess of 5 days. That's just 5 days. Same thing with like Thanksgiving break in the fall. If it's only 5 days, then it's not going to stop the timeline. So 30 calendar days means that you include Saturday and Sunday when you count through the calendar. And that this is, again, if the parent tells you this verbally, you should ask them to put it in writing, so that way you can calendar it 30 days from that. But an email is considered in writing. Now, as you're preparing all of your paperwork for the IEP meeting, consider sending home draft copies of proposed new goals. Make sure that you stamp them draft. I bought a draft stamp when I was a teacher and I loved it. I used it so much and I was so happy I got it. You can do a draft watermark a lot of times when you're printing, but sometimes it helps if you're sending home paperwork to just have that draft stamp ready to go. And also, you might work for a district that tells you not to do that. And in that case, you follow what your district tells you to do. It is sometimes a way to get the parents to be more engaged and feel like they're participating because they had a chance to read through proposed new goals. You might want to print them on a paperwork that's not SACE paperwork or your IEP format. Maybe you print them on a regular blank piece of paper. But it's a good idea to get some input from the parents prior to the meeting. And if you do that, make sure you put it in the notes page of the IEP that the parent was provided with a draft copy of proposed new goals, because that's how you document ways that you included the parental participation in development of the IEP. Also, create an agenda that you can send out to all of the IEP team members. So that includes the parents. And your agenda would just outline, right, a small outline of what the different steps are that are going to happen in the meeting and the different topics that are going to be discussed. That way you can include in there, right? We're going to talk about accommodations. We're going to talk about participation and inclusion, right? And that way the parent knows that as the meeting progresses, you're going to get to topics that they might be thinking are a real priority for them. If you have any student work samples, get those ready for the meeting. That really helps parents to kind of understand, maybe related to the goals where they're at, and also for everybody on the team to see these real tangible products that the student has made, whether it's an art activity or whether it's an essay that they wrote. It really makes a difference for the team to kind of come together and celebrate the student, because IEPs can be a very negative experience for a parent. It's another reason I put the next bullet point. So photos or videos of the student, right? Maybe engaging in activities at school. Maybe it's, you know, those kind of videos that you can't post online, but you could have on your iPad and show at the meeting, or in a screen share to say, you know, I can't send this out, but I want you to watch and see how great this one activity was in the classroom. If you have copies of those test scores, including a handout, right? Sometimes like the LPAC has a handout that explains to parents what the scores mean. So include that if you give them a copy of those test scores. Any home resources for the parents, so ideas on how to improve student literacy at home, or how to, you know, get students learning more of their executive functioning skills through activities at home. Any of those kind of handouts you can give to parents is always great to have on hand at IEP meetings. And of course, have your copy of your parent rights in the parent's language ready to go. Before the meeting, make sure that you review with any expectations for other team members. So if the school nurse is coming to the meeting, make sure that they have that individual health service plan ready to share. If the gen ed teacher is going to come and maybe they only spend one period per day with the student, review what they need to bring to the meeting. If there's any outside agencies involved, so regional center, some students have a CASA, which is a court-appointed student advocate, support advocate. Am I saying that wrong? If anybody knows the CASA.
Special advocate.
Special advocate, thank you. Court-appointed special advocate. Sometimes they are the ed rights holder for a student, and they might come to the IEP meeting in place of a parent in the event of a foster care situation. Some students have social workers, so make sure that they are also invited to the meeting and that they can participate. And then there's other service providers who may not attend the meeting. So as I had gone through, right, all of our required participants in the meeting, if the student is in your SDC classroom, the speech therapist may not attend the meeting. But in that case, you can have an excusal form ready and then have any information from the speech therapist, right? Progress on goals, propose new goals, the services they're recommending, really having that information ready. In best practices, that speech therapist would have called the parent the night before and discussed that information with them, because that can also kind of put the parent's mind at ease. Then if you have to schedule an interpreter, make sure that they come early, because it really will give you a chance as the case carrier, as the teacher, to tell the interpreter what we're going to go through. You know, make sure that they're really interpreting things verbatim, because you don't want anything to kind of get lost in translation. And then also let your administrator know, so either the principal, your program specialist, or your school psychologist or counselor, whoever is the administrator in the meeting, let them know ahead of time if there's anything that's kind of been coming out of the parent's mouth a lot and you think they're going to request something special, just to give them a heads up and make sure that the whole team is on that same page. So if you're going to do your meeting at a school site, and I know that this is not really a common practice right now, but I have a feeling coming soon, you know, next school year, most likely some IEP meetings might be returning to a school site. So in the event you're having an IEP meeting at your school site, make sure that you have a room reserved for the meeting. And it might be your classroom, it might not be a special separate room. But in any case, outside that room, put a sign up that says do not disturb, because that can really cut down on interruptions to the meeting, which is just going to make your meeting go longer. Also, let the parent know if there's any parking or check-in procedures. A lot of campuses, I mean, I go and visit campuses all the time. And sometimes I don't know where to park. I don't know what gate to go to. Sometimes the sign that says office is not that big. So when you call the night before, you can say, just as a heads up, this is the best place to park. Look for the blue door. You're going to go in the green gate, right? Give them some of those heads up that they know they're going to have to sign in. I know a lot of campus, like especially in Fullerton School District, you have to show your driver's license when you go in, right? Because they scan it and then they give you a sticker with your picture on it. So make sure that the parent knows they have to check in at an office. Also, let your front office know what time the meeting's happening and the location of the meeting, and especially like the student's name. So if you have regional center show up and they say, I'm here for an IEP, you know, the front office person, which hopefully it's your secretary, but it might be a sub or someone filling in. They might say, well, I don't know any meeting happening, or I don't know where it's at. And you can lose a lot of time in that first, and then that person can get frustrated because they're in the office waiting, and meanwhile the meeting is happening. So make sure you communicate with your front office staff. If you can, prepare a folder for the parents to take home all of this information in. And also think about the room, right? What is your room or your table set up telling the parents? I was always told when I did my credential that if it is a rectangle shaped table, the parent sits at the head of the table, right? Because you want them to feel empowered and feel like they have this opportunity to talk to everybody and how important they are to the team. So definitely try to make sure that the parent feels comfortable when they're there, that they feel welcome. We used to always make sure to put some pictures of the students out on the table, giving the parent a pen ahead of time so they don't have to ask for one. Some of those small things can make a big difference in the way that the parent's going to come into the meeting and participate. Now, if you're doing an online meeting, which is very common, ask the parents the best way for them to connect for that meeting, right? Do they have a device for a video chat? Do they have a good internet connection to, you know, be able to sustain the video and audio feed? Are they comfortable talking with professionals via a video meeting, right? If you can, schedule that one-on-one practice session before the meeting. That way you can make sure that their microphone's working, that their video's working. Maybe they can practice asking questions to you over it, because I know obviously for some of us that lead Zoom meetings all the time, we're very comfortable with it, but I could see where it would be very intimidating if it was your first time joining in an IEP meeting like that. Now, when you meet, it's important that everyone gets introduced on that Zoom or Google Meet for the IEP meeting. Don't leave anybody out. Don't say, you know, don't assume it's not important. If the parent, right, they can see that participants list, they know that there's a couple of people in there that they didn't get introduced to, and that can feel really uncomfortable. Review the meeting norms. If you're letting everybody know to mute, if you're going to use the chat box, if you're not, make sure that everyone in the meeting is kind of in agreement about that. If the parents want to keep their camera off, you really should allow that as appropriate, just because, again, you want the family to feel comfortable and feel okay to speak up, and they might get kind of nervous having the camera on if it's something that they're not used to, if they have other people at home or in the background, and that might be something that they can't control. If they do turn the camera off, make sure that you confirm with them which family members are participating in that Zoom, because if they turn the camera off, you may not know that mom came up and joined in. So just clarify when you start the video Zoom. I want to know, like, can you please tell me which family members are there at home participating in this meeting? Because you're going to need to put it in the notes of the IEP. Make sure that you put that agenda up on the screen share and review that. If you changed anything that you might have sent home or out, make sure that you kind of clarify, you know, what we're going to go through today, so that the parent, again, has that heads up of what's being discussed. If it is over the phone, kind of last minute, right? Sometimes parents say, I can't make it, go ahead and hold the meeting without me. ask the parent to pull out their last year's IEP, because that can help them to follow along with the different sections, especially when we have like these 20-page documents. Hearing someone discuss a 20-page document over the phone is really confusing. And then as you go through the IEP, keep confirming agreement, right? Ask the parents before you go on to the next page, right? Do they have any questions? Was that all clear? Is there anything they'd like clarification of? If you can, use a Google Doc maybe for questions in the event that you don't have a chat box. I know some formats we don't have chat boxes. Now, during the meeting, and this again, if there was a most important slide in this presentation, this would be it. Listen carefully and really consider any requests from the parents. Avoid any immediate response of, that's not an issue here, right? If they say that their child mentioned that they were being bullied. I know sometimes as teachers, right, we don't want to hear that. That sounds like I don't care about their child. And so we want to immediately defend our program and say, no one's bullying him, right? But that's not the best response. The best response is to ask the parent to explain more. Can you please tell us what he said? Can you tell us what's going on? You want to make sure that if they ask about an accommodation or if they ask about a service, that you don't say like, oh, we don't do that here, right? That's not the response. But that the response is, let's talk about what that issue is and how we can meet the student's need. Make sure that you provide details about school programs that are happening that could support the student, right? Sometimes we are doing buddy programs on campus and you're participating in that and you know that the student's participating in that. But if the parent doesn't know, they might not have that sense of, oh, the school is supporting my child in building friendships. So make sure that you talk about those kind of programs. If the parent wants to modify a goal or add a new goal, listen to their concern. And then really think about, like, is that something that we could add? Would it help the student work on an identified area of need? It's definitely a good idea to go along with the parent as much as is appropriate and modify the IEP with their input, because that is an IEP that has parental participation. If they want to add an accommodation that can support the student relative to what they're asking about, think about adding it. I mean, as we know, a lot of accommodations are listed and sometimes we never use them, but it's much easier to say, that's a great idea, let's add that accommodation, than to sit there and argue with the parent and say, no, they don't need that, they would never use it, right? It does not hurt to add that extra 3 words to the accommodations list. Then make sure that you put in the notes page if there were concerns from the parent and that you discuss them thoroughly, right? That we discussed these other options or we discussed other programs, that the team took the parent's question about accommodations and we added 2 more accommodations. Because my last bullet point, if the parents make a request and the team ignores it or the team does not discuss ways that the school can meet that concern, it's a very quick grounds for the parents to file to sue the school district. So make sure that you are listening to them and that everything that they mention as a concern, you are talking about it. Now, the final slide that I have here to talk about is during the meeting. Can a parent record an IEP meeting? So this question comes up, and I'm sure most of you know, yes, the parent has the right to electronically audio tape proceedings of IEP team meetings. Now, doing meetings over Zoom is a really new thing, right? That's only been going on for about the past year. Exactly, right? Was today March? March 10th, March 9th? We're almost to exactly a year of the school closures. So there still is the language within our law for audio tape recordings. There is nothing in the law for videotape recordings. So it's important to note that if a parent wants to record the meeting, that you clarify with them that they would be completing an audio tape recording of the meeting. Now the LEA, right, the school district also has the right to electronically record the meeting. But I feel like it's very antagonistic for a district to say that they want to record the meeting unless the parent says that they want to record the meeting, if that makes sense. In any case, 24 hours before the meeting is the notice, right? So if a parent sits down at an IEP meeting and pulls out a tape recorder to tape record, the district has the right to say, I'm sorry, but you did not give us 24 hours notice. So then they cannot record the meeting. Most districts though, because we don't want to get into unnecessary conflicts with parents, most districts would say, go ahead and let them record, but then the district needs to also put a recorder out on the table and record the meeting, because you each need to have your own copy of that meeting, if that makes sense. Now, if the parent, right, if the district says, I want to record the meeting and the parent does not consent to the LEA audio tape recording, then the meeting cannot be recorded. So you have to have parental consent to record a meeting. Now, because we are doing so many meetings virtually, LA Unified came out with a really great recommendation for their special ed teams that they should make a statement at the start of the meeting. And the reason for that is we're all on Zoom, right? And some people might have their camera off, so I don't know if they're recording or not. So it's important to, after you do introductions, make a statement reminding everybody, right? This is an IEP meeting, even though it's being held virtually. And we still need to agree to confidentiality, that anything discussed in this meeting is confidential, and that both parties in this meeting right now are not recording. And that's really the best way to kind of cover yourself, that the parents aren't recording it without your permission. I had that happen once where, we started the IEP meeting and then the dad took out his phone and hit like record on a memo and then put it out on the table. And I was like, what are you doing? You have to let us know. So it's okay to kind of interrupt and say, what's going on? Here are some sources for you guys if you want to read anything more from California Department Ed, about procedural safeguards or guidance during COVID-19, holding virtual IEP meetings. This is a really great resource. Also, what the IDEA says about parental participation in IEPs. And then the timelines is another great one. I'm going to see if I can switch. I want to share this with you because I love this so much. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can switch to this. So if you click, does everybody see the timelines? Can anybody give me a thumbs up or on their reactions? Can you click a thumbs up if you see a green? Thank you, Scarlett. So this is the link in that sources, and it's from a law firm that works in special education. And it's a really great, just like 2-page PDF of all of those important timelines to know for assessment, anything applicable to IEPs, reassessments, also any of those like additional IEP team meetings, transition planning, IEEs, discipline. This is the one I was saying, right? This is the only time you need to have that real emergency 10-day meeting. And then also if a parent requests any records, and then it's showing over here kind of where it comes from in the law. So I just wanted to show you guys that really quick. That is the resource that is right here that says www.f3law. So please take a look at that one. And then finally, anybody can jump in if you want to talk and ask a question or put it in the chat box. You can also email me if you want to, if you have a question you don't want to ask. But I just put a little thing here. Have you guys ever seen this saying that remember why you started? So always remember, right? We all became special education teachers for a reason. And it's because we believe in helping our students. We believe in getting them the best, helping them be successful, and all of this other kind of details that we bring to the table as special education teachers, as case carriers. It sounds like a lot of rigmarole, but remember why you started. You want what's best for students, and just focus on that. Thanks for coming, everybody. Feel free to unmute if you want to ask a question. And Dr. Rao has posted a link. If you can click on that and take that survey, that helps us with the people that are funding our services for providing these webinars. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Elizabeth.
And do feel free to ask questions. I did not mean to post that survey as meaning like we're almost done. We do still have plenty of time for questions. And I just wanted to say, Professor Taberski, I loved your idea of putting pictures out of the student. I never did that.
Okay.
And that's just such a nice idea to really make it personal and just remember who it's all for. And I also liked your idea of seating the parent kind of strategically so that they feel empowered. I thought those
Yeah.
were really good suggestions.
You know, a lot of us, we would have the meeting in our classroom and you have like the dinky student chairs, or, you know, you have odd stools, or it's just kind of like awkward seating. And we would always kind of make sure the parent has the nicest chairs, right? You want them to know they are kind of the honored guest coming to that meeting, and that they matter, right? We can't have the IEP meeting without them.
I love that. And I think even if that's not quite the culture in somebody's district already, the teacher can easily create that culture in their IEP meetings of honoring the parent, making them feel like, you know, they're there and they're so important. Those little things make a big difference, I think.
Oh yeah, it does make a huge difference. And I think too, because you know, a lot of times if it's parents that you don't see that often or you don't get to talk to them, if you can have some pictures up of like maybe the last fun event that your class did, or if you went on a CBI, put it out there for the parents to see, because a lot of times we can't, you know, post things because of all the electronic, you know, data laws. Catherine's asking a question. Do we put the parents' concerns and priorities on the present levels page where it talks about student strengths and areas? Yeah, there should be. I know in SACE, if your district is using, and I'm just answering the question from Catherine, if your district is using SACE, the Special Education Information System, it's on that page for present levels, that first page that says, you know, student strengths and preferences, and then the next kind of box you fill in says parent concerns and priorities. Yes, you can type that information in ahead of time because you did that survey and because you might have called them and done a phone interview. Yeah, you can get that information ahead of time and type it in. Then what you do is, whether you're doing the meeting virtually or in person, when you get to that page, you're going to literally say, this is information that you told me in that parent survey, or that we talked about on the phone when I did the phone interview with you. I typed it into this box. Would you like to add anything? Would you like to change anything? Like, remind them that this is their time to put input into that box. It's okay to type some stuff in there ahead of time, but you don't limit them to that. Make sure that you say they still are part of this, you know, ongoing process of developing the IEP. They can give more input, they can give more thoughts, and remind them also that when you get to the end of the IEP document, they can stop you and go back to it. You know, once we go to the next page of the IEP, it's not like it's set in stone, right? So sometimes it helps parents relax if you say, you know what, I'm going to read what you wrote. You can add to it now, but we can come back and revisit this once we get through all the goals and services. You know, it's definitely very much a give and take, and nothing is like this, you know, closed trap of the parents can't give you more input.
Hi, Professor. This is Carolina, and I had a question in regards to when the parents invite additional guests. I know that with the recording, it was a 24-hour notice. Does that apply as well to any additional guests during that time?
Great question. The parents do not have to tell you ahead of time if they are bringing someone else to the meeting, unless it is an attorney. So it means, like, if they're going to bring an outside service provider, if they're going to bring a family member, if they're going to bring an advocate, they don't have to tell you ahead of time. The only time they do have to tell you is if they are bringing legal counsel, such as a lawyer. And the reason for that is then the district has the right to be able to bring their own lawyer to the meeting. So a lot of times it's still considered really respectful for the parents to let the district know ahead of time if they're bringing an advocate, but they are not legally bound to tell us if they're bringing an advocate. But then you have to clarify, right, that the person is an advocate, that they're not an attorney.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, I really appreciate that clarification.
Sometimes it's so awkward because you have to, like, the parent is standing there in the front office and you're like, who's that with you? You have to tell me what their role is.
Identify yourself. Yeah,
I know, it's so awkward.
I do remember another professor mentioning that we should have always equal power amongst both groups. And so I kind of wanted that clarification of, like how you mentioned, if it's just a neighbor or a personal advocate, but not a legal individual, then they're allowed without a notification. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Catherine added another question about putting in our perspective as teacher, or is that section strictly for the parents? if you're talking about the box for the student preferences, interests, that one is for anybody in the IEP team can add information to that box. But the box that says concerns of parents is just for parents. Any of our concerns or our perspectives should definitely go in the present levels, right? We're informing the present levels. How are they doing academically? How are they doing socially? How are they doing with adaptive skills? But the box that says parent concerns is really just parent concerns. Sure thing. Thank you. Does anybody else out there have a question? Or are you guys so busy doing the survey? You just don't have time to ask a question.
All right, I'm going to paste the survey one more time. And if you guys could please, it just takes 2 minutes. The title of this webinar was Successful IEP Meetings. And so if you could quickly take that survey, that helps so that we continue to get